Proportions, checking the conditions. So we've already done a one sample z-test, z-intervals. We know the conditions for those. But now we're going to introduce two samples, and the conditions change a little bit. So let's review one sample conditions and look at the two samples. So one sample, we have the assumptions that individuals are independent. We use a simple random sample or a representative sample to determine that. We can't determine if things are independent for sure, but we use the SRS. And also we want to check that our sample is less than 10% of the entire population. We check those conditions to show the independence assumption. We don't talk about independence, just state those two. When the sample is large enough, we also need to state, and we use the success failures for this. So there are at least 10 successes and at least 10 failures. We should be very familiar with those now. For two samples, it changes just a little bit. Individuals are independent. We still need to check that. Sample is large enough. But we also need to check that the data in both groups are independent. So group 1 and group 2 are independent of each other. We do these things in a very similar way. We want to find an SRS or that it's representative, but we need to check this for both groups. We also want to make sure that our sample is less than 10% of the entire population, and again, we check that for both groups that we have. The sample is large enough. So we still check success failure. It needs to be at least 10. And just like above, we want to check this with both of the groups. So in two samples, we're comparing two groups. We're saying, is there a difference between them? And we need to check the conditions for each of those groups. Finally, the data in both groups are independent. There's no just rule for this. You have to think about how the data was collected. Is there any reason to think in the way it was collected, one group depends on another? One group could influence another. So we kind of talk about this a little abstractly. I'll provide a link to the formulas. This is a little quick reference that has all the conditions for everything we're going to do this year and the formulas. Click on that, check it out. You might want to bookmark it. You need to know all the information in this table.